Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast. We've got a great guest today, Paul Neal. He's also a podcaster, and he has a great business that focuses on helping attorneys, service professionals, entrepreneurs acquire the building that they run their business from. This is something that I wish I did years ago. Now we're a virtual business, so that option really doesn't exist for me. But Paul, welcome to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast.
Yeah. Hey, Jay, excited to be here, man. Thanks for having me on.
So tell us a little bit about your background first. Where are you from? How'd you get to where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm from Virginia, and I'm back in Virginia now. Started at the beach and went off to school in the mountains and spent some time in the Research Triangle Park of North Carolina, and ended back up at the beach and then the mountains. So I've kind of traveled around the sort of the mid-Atlantic here. And my story is it's more of an entrepreneurial story. My vision was originally that I wanted to invent something, was kind of my thing. And I thought I was going to make me rich. And so I went off to school to study engineering, and did study electrical engineering, and wasn't really thrilled with that field. But through that process, actually started my first business before we finished college. And 6 businesses later, some really successful. One sold for quite a bit, and then one blew up and was a very bad experience. And then some other experiences along the way. Learned a lot about myself, about business ownership, entrepreneurship, and working with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. A lot of my history has been in and around real estate finance in that space. And I think I did my first real estate finance transaction in 1998. And so I gravitated towards the commercial side, and really sort of over time noticed this dichotomy between business owners that kind of fell in 2 camps. One that bought the building and the space that they ran their business from, and then others that just kind of perpetually leased. And as I noticed the sort of the delta of their sort of wealth accumulation experience over time, I felt like that was kind of an interesting place to plant my flag. And that, combined with the idea there's a lot of confusion and misinformation and just plain ignorance about that process and what's involved, just because people don't do it very often. You know, they might buy a personal residence every couple of years and maybe some investment properties, but very few people, buy commercial property and don't know what that's like. And there's really no one source that I could find you could go to. So that's kind of where we planted our flag. And that's what we're fired up about doing, helping business owners when it makes sense to approach that and help them do it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And actually, one of our clients is two young attorneys. They've had a couple good years. They've had a couple relatively big payouts. They're personal injury guys, and sometimes they get some cash on hand. So one of the things I encourage them to do is, get a building that they obviously can run the business from. Maybe there's a couple other, businesses in the building to help, give them future growth opportunity and, cash flow, et cetera, and get a little bit bigger footprint. And the other thing I recommend is if you can have a slight billboard location, that there's a hell of a value there. Yeah. Because if you're here they happen to be in my community, but I talked about a couple places that are relatively high traffic and relatively, they're not retail per se, but they're, they could function as a billboard for the firm. And so you're going to get just like drive-by brand awareness, and you're also going to have that physical presence in the community. So there's a whole marketing component to having your own location as well.
Well, like along those lines, I was going to say along those lines, just a great example of a friend of mine client that owns an HVAC company, and he was growing that and acquiring other ones. And anyway, long story short, same idea. He was paying thousands of dollars a month for a billboard, and he was outgrowing his physical location. And so this property came up for sale on a major thoroughfare in his market. It's like a 4-lane highway, but it's not like an interstate. It's,
Yeah.
there's traffic lights and whatnot. But anyway, I forget the traffic numbers daily going by, but his whole mission was to stop paying for the billboard, buy the building, and then line all of his trucks up along the highway or the road. So everyone, 50, 60,000 cars a day
Yeah.
in the local community where his business is, see his name. I mean, every day coming and going to work and shopping and whatnot. So to your point, yeah, that's one strategy. It can be bad. So he saved money by not buying the billboard and on rent when he bought the building. So it was a double win for him.
That's fantastic. So what, you said when the business conditions are right. When are the business conditions right to buy your building as a law firm, or, primarily for law firms, but
Yeah.
adjacent professional services and entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So let's start with when it's not right. So you mentioned you're a virtual business, so probably not a good idea if you're a virtual business. I tell people, really, our ideal client, when it makes the most sense, is if you have a business that has a local presence and a need for a local presence, a physical location. So you've got employees that are coming to the office, you've got patients or clients or customers that are coming in. And you have to be there. You're not going to, distribute everybody across the nation, around the world. So that's requirement number one. Requirement number two, when it doesn't make sense, after launching your business, you've got to get a few years of what I call your sea legs, right? We're all, as business owners and entrepreneurs, maybe you're an attorney and you're working for a firm and then you venture out on your own. Well, there's a lot of lessons to learn, as you well know, from not just doing the work of an attorney, but you've got marketing, you've got business management, you've got employee management. Now you're moving to a whole different category, and so once you can go down that road for 2, 3, 4 years successfully, you've overcome some of the challenges, you've got consistent growing cash flow. And ideally, you've got either some repeat clients or maybe some referral sources or marketing systems that are fairly dependable. So you know that, hey, this business it's got a good history, but it's also got a great glide path going forward. And another time not to buy one potentially is if you think you're going to be exiting in the next, couple of years for whatever reason, unless you're looking to try to add real estate to package like a sale, which can add value and open the door to more buyers actually. But that's when it's not right. So if you can check the boxes that we have a reason to be here locally, we have a need, we need a physical space for whatever reason, again, clients, employees, or some combination thereof. And you got 2 or 3 years of good, solid financial, background and history, and the future looks bright. Then it's time to start considering, should I do this? Because you're going to start, and you might start from home, but then probably move into leased spaces. At some point, you're going to have a lease renewal. And it's generally not a great idea to be thinking about this 30 days before the lease renewal, because it's a process. And we get those calls occasionally, and it's a bit of a fire sale nightmare thing. And we're like, nah, you probably just need to renew your lease, and let's come back, renew it for a shorter term if you can. But generally, when you're 6, 12, 18 months out on a decision on, do we continue to stay here and re-up the lease, if that is an option, or not. And sometimes you don't know because you think it's an option, and your landlord will show up 30 days before and say, hey, we're not going to renew it, or 60 days before. I get those phone calls too. So which is another reason why you should consider it, but we're not even there yet. So I think if you've checked those boxes and you're within that window of lease renewal, that's when you really need to start digging in and say, hey, does it make sense now? And it may not. It might be something that's a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan or a 7-year plan based upon your overall strategy.
That's awesome. So one of the things we're recommending now for a lot of law firms is a multi-location strategy.
Hmm.
And the principal reason is based around marketing, local Google marketing. So the Google Maps and the Google local service ads reward you for proximity.
Hmm.
Now, you can't tread lightly on this strategy for a couple reasons. Number one is, if you open a second, third location, you have to have enough Google reviews to give it a little bit of oomph, in the algorithm.
Right.
So I don't know if that's written into Google's patents, but and so Google reviews are really important. But the good news is you don't need like 500. You only need 1 to 2 per week. So if you're at the size of a business where you're getting like, let's say you're, generally signing 30 or 40 clients and closing 30 or 40 cases each month, then you have enough wherewithal to spread the reviews around to 2, 3, 4 locations. The second thing that's really important, you got to have a physical location. Like you can't have a WeWork or a post office box.
Mm.
Like you can't fool Google with that. As a matter of fact, it's against their terms of service to try and fool them. And in some instances, if like a competitor complains or sometimes the algorithm triggers a Google investigation, you have to physically go to the office and they basically do like a FaceTime where you got to show them, hey, here's our sign on the door, here's our files, here's our desk. So you need a legit location, and sometimes
Right.
it's enough to just be like I say to lawyers, get an office in your accountant's office, and
Mm.
it's super great if you're at like Main Street and First Avenue, and you can
Mhm.
have, if they're the Main Street address, you can have the First Avenue address. There's a door on the side, you can put a sign on the door. That works really well for this Google initiative for the maps and local service ads. But there's a lot of money to be made from those calls that you're going to get from the maps and from Google Screen local service ads. So it's really a valuable strategy for the firms that are at that level. But some firms are going to the next step, like the guys who really have some deep pockets are getting second and third locations. And one guy, is a super smart guy, my friend Jeff Phillips in Phoenix, is getting retail locations. So he's
Mm.
actually getting like small mall locations, strip mall
Mhm.
locations, because those are great retail storefronts. A couple
Mhm.
people can work out of that location. Another thing is if you're like a couple people have long commutes, maybe a couple days a week, you can find a location where there's lots of consumers. You're going to take advantage of that proximity marketing in the Google algorithm. So to talk about the strategy of buying multiple locations.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a great strategy. So, from an ownership standpoint, I mean, if we take a step up and look at a single location first, and then how to leverage that in multiple locations, we have clients doing that. When you own the space, so over time, basically you now have two businesses, right? You have your operating business, your legal business, but then now you have this real estate business as well. And so you're effectively now developing a real estate business just by operating your normal day-to-day operations, and as such, as the benefits that are associated with that, as you make each payment, you're paying down some of the principal balance. Over time, that property is probably appreciating in value. Nobody knows the short run, obviously, 1, 2, 3 years, but if you look 5, 10, 15 years into the future or in the past, most people would say, real estate's more expensive today than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, sort of writ large, right? So that's a trend that's probably going to continue. And so your building is going to be worth more in value. There's some tax advantages. There's a whole lot of other advantages we can get into, like bringing in some tenants of your own, so you can lease out some of the space. Maybe if they're a related business, or even if they're not, they can help pay the freight on the business. But then this multi-tenant, this multi-location strategy is not unlike the McDonald's strategy, where they sold hamburgers. That's what most people think, but the reality is they were in the real estate acquisition business, and so they would find great pieces of real estate and they would build a restaurant and they would run an operating company out of that, let a franchisee do it. But then,
Great point.
but
Yeah.
then they're building their real wealth is in the real estate. And so, two examples, I have clients that did this with car washes. Same idea. These guys started fresh out of college. Well, they were like 3 or 4 years out of college. They tried a few things, nothing really worked, but they got in the car wash business, and over a period of about 10 years had developed multiple locations. They used some of the tax advantages of owning the first ones. They started small. They were to sell and get to larger spaces, better spaces, and leverage the capital gain without taxes through a 1031. Anyway, position themselves with multiple locations, and really the whole goal was for the car washes just to give them an okay lifestyle, to pay the freight while the land over time appreciates in value. Well, fast forward from, 10, 12 years later, they sold like multiple locations for 8 figures. I mean, it was a good
Awesome.
day. They did really
Great
well.
strategy. Yeah. And quick turnaround.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then, we have a dental client who down at the beach who has has this strategy where, you're only going to drive so far for a dentist, right? So, the idea was come out of school, be a dentist, eventually get my building, but then, oh yeah, now I want multiple locations. And so over the course of, it's been probably 15 years now, he set up 5 locations, and he's not really thrilled about being a dentist. He was really kind of focused on building the dental business, and he would hire young dentists out of college and then let them run each of these new locations. And he had
Fantastic.
sort of figured out his marketing,
Yeah.
his systems, his, all that. And so he just overlaid that like a little mini franchise. And now he's got 5 locations that they're all doing operations. They're renting from his physical real estate that he all owns. And so the value of this enterprise is just going, through the roof. And so it's a fabulous, fabulous strategy.
I love it.
And there's some great ways to leverage like low down payment and things if you're going to put your business in the building versus just buying a straight up investment property.
That's great. And, I always wondered, Morgan and Morgan is, building out their national footprint, but they even have, they're the largest personal injury attorney in the country. They even have 6 locations in Orlando, which is where their big head office is. And I was always trying to figure out, why is that? And then it became real clear. They were targeting different Google Maps locations and
Mhm.
local service ads, as I mentioned. And then someone told me they were, buying these law firms. So they were, buying the location, getting the existing, just changing the name, but they had the Google reviews and they had the built-in traction there. And then obviously, now the light bulb's coming on. John Morgan's a pretty smart guy. It's probably the real estate play as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what a great way to do it if you can buy a business or expand a business and let the business just pay for the real estate. And oh, by the way, if you can profit from the business as well, as most of them I'm sure do, it's a kind of the double win.
That's awesome.
Because
So
the real estate piece is, Jay, is, it's a passive thing, right? It's something, it's like I tell people, they're like, why would you want to buy your building? And my response is generally, well, why do you want to buy your house? I mean, why don't you just rent somewhere forever? You don't have to paint the house. You don't have to fix the AC when it goes bad.
excuse
Do
me.
any of that. But there's a litany of reasons why, right? You want to, you're going to build equity over time. You have control over the space. You can decorate it. You can renovate it. You can expand it. You can do so many things with it. But at the end of the day, when you look back over 20, 30 years, you look at the wealth and the equity accumulated in your personal residence. That's the
But
basis for the bulk of the wealth in this country today, right? Most of it comes from, when you look at like retirees, the bulk of their wealth is in the real estate that they own. And so your business, you're in business, you're fighting the good fight every day, you're doing all that. So 10, 20, 30 years is going to pass either way. And at the end of those 10, 20, 30 years, you're either going to pretty much have nothing, or you might sell the operations of the business. But that's all. But you could at the same time have a building that might now be worth 2, 3, 4, $5 million, or multiple buildings.
love it.
Like my friend Kathy in OBGYN, she did that. Her husband kind of kicked her in the butt to get the building and paid it off over 12 years. Was just recently acquired by a larger medical group. They're buying the small medical practices. So she sold her business, negotiated to continue to work back for 3 or 4 years because she's not quite ready to retire. And oh, by the way, they're going to rent the building from her for a very nice, substantial sum of retirement income for her, because all her patients are coming there. They don't want to move this new practice they just bought to some other location. So,
This is
so there's a
awesome.
lot of
This is
reasons
some of the
why.
best. Yeah, this is some of the best consulting for law firms, and it has nothing to do with marketing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
except for the proximity play. Um, how much is involved? Like, let's say you're a decent firm, like my client I mentioned earlier, a couple guys, couple locations, and they add a couple more locations. How much is involved in managing the real estate?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So if, if you're just going to be, an owner or user and you take the entire space, so it's really, it's not that much more than, again, managing your home, and if you have an
Or
office
managing your
manager
leased space, because like
or manager,
nine,
yeah, because
nine times out of 10, like if your air conditioning goes out, you got to call the AC guy. You got to meet
yeah,
him. The landlord's not gonna
no.
care as
And you
much
might even be on a
if
triple, you might even be on a
you're
triple
sweating
net and
your
you're
ass
paying
off.
the freight for all that anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but if you employ one of the strategies that a lot of our clients do, and you build or buy a space larger than you need, and maybe you take 60%, you lease out 40 to somebody else, then now there's a little bit of landlord responsibility. So you might have a management company handle that for you. I mean, you can do that. You can even have a management company handle your own space if you pay them a small, percentage ride. So that would be an operational consideration, but I mean, that's what they do all day long. And so it can be autopilot if you want it to be, and it's not very expensive at the end of the day.
What do you think about the timing? Like, I mean, I guess the biggest thing going on in the market, everybody, who aren't day to day like you are, assumes that a lot of people aren't going back to work, that commercial real estate value is declining. But then there's other interesting factors. Like I've seen a ton of buildings convert to Amazon warehouses and ghost kitchens, and
Yeah.
the amazing thing about commerce, it evolves. It doesn't, what you think, like you assume, market change, people aren't going to the office, building devaluation, commercial real estate devaluation, but there's so many other factors. What are you seeing in the markets today?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's, you have to be careful. When the chickens cry, the sky's falling. It is in certain industries and certain locations. So like I probably wouldn't want to go out and invest in a large class A office building, right? Because in the big cities particularly, because they have, that the fundamental pattern of work has changed where they're not coming into the office as much. Although there's, I think, a reversal to that trend. I'm seeing a lot of pushback where
Yeah.
companies. I have a friend who owns an office like interior design business. They've done this for like 60 years. It's a family business. And he said, I can't give you the name, but one of the Fortune 500 companies in our area that's his client, they right before COVID, they built this huge, 10-story Class A building, and he had the contract to fill it all up, which was a great day for him. And so then COVID comes and everybody, goes home. Well, now he was just telling me a few months ago when I was with him that they're now bringing everybody back, and they are a little more flexible. So instead of 5 days a week, it's, maybe 3 or whatever. But they found out that their productivity went into the toilet when everybody went into work from home, because you and I both know it takes a different kind of a person and a discipline to work from home because there's a million distractions. And so if you're not used to it, so so the trends do move, but I will say this too, that most of the businesses that we deal with that are, service professionals that have a need for a local presence, they aren't going away. You're not going to Amazon out, like the plumber. You're not going to Amazon out the veterinarian. You've got to bring your dog and your cat somewhere, right? Physically. Um, a lot of the service industries will use these flexible warehouse spaces where they have office in the front, and those are, you can't even find that. You have to pretty much build it now,
Yeah.
because it's just in such high demand. And you have a lot of smaller firms too, Jay, they don't need 5,000 square feet. They need about 1,000, 2,000 square feet, and that's a great size space for them. And that's hard to come by, believe it or not. So, you know, particularly in the area where, again, from a strategy standpoint, a lot of our clients, you mentioned right when we kicked off about this idea of turning your space into a billboard, right, for branding. You don't really want to be tucked into some large office tower
Industrial
somewhere
park. Yeah.
downtown, right? Yeah, because now you who wants to drive downtown, number one, as a client or a patient or customer. They want to be near, where they live, because I think that's the other thing that maybe has come out of COVID is people definitely, in the Amazon world, is that we really love and value convenience. And so if we can get there in 5, 10, 15 minutes without a ton of traffic and a ton of issues, then we're going to do that. But if we have to drive 30 or 35 minutes and go downtown and parking garages and things like that, it's really my wife and I don't do it anymore. In fact, we relocated back to the mountains so we can walk literally everywhere or ride our electric bikes, and we're loving life. I mean, we went back and visited the beach just this past weekend, and as soon as we're pulling in, we get the big sign that says, "Oh, all lanes are blocked," and whatever. We're like, "Oh, I've heard this story again,
Yeah.
Groundhog Day." It's like I forgot what it was like, but I quickly remembered. So I think people are their habits, and even the malls, you'll see they're turning into these little outdoor, because people still want to see people. They still want to go into places, and I do think this too, as an aside, and this is pure speculation on my part, so you may agree or may not agree, but I think that with the internet age and even AI, as the world becomes less and less real and more artificial, people are going to really want more and more authenticity, and seeing people face to face, and shaking a hand, looking somebody in the eyeball, knowing that you're real and it's not some video that was made by Google or whatever. I think it's going to become more and more important. And so having that location is going to be critical.
Yeah, you're right. There's some very creative spaces. There's a space. I'm in South Florida and Delray Beach. Atlantic Avenue has become a real go-to place with restaurants and retail. And
Mhm.
one of the banks opened a very clever space. It's almost like a Starbucks, and it's
Mm,
like the Starbucks is the third place, right? Like home, work, and where you
right.
hang out with friends, and so they have all these little spaces where you can take a call, spaces
Mhm.
where you can have a one-on-one, one-on-two meeting. That there actually is a coffee shop, and then it's like the open bank is right there, and then in the back they have actually a couple boardrooms you can rent. That'd
Oh,
be an
wow.
interesting concept for personal injury, like to have that kind of city space,
Hmm.
welcome people into your space, be a part of the community,
Yeah.
have a coffee shop, build the brand, and have that, all the great opportunities you talked about, owning the real estate, the tax advantages, and the retail billboard I talked about.
Yeah. I mean, wow, absolutely. And I just think about that from an attorney standpoint. Most attorneys are, so many of them are trying to build, get networked into the community, like you said. So, your internet marketing, but then also your business development just locally. What a great way to do it, to open your space up. And you've got these boardrooms for, have all the events and the meetings right there in your own facility. I mean, that has to lead to business, right? And just that trust factor that, hey, you guys, it's like I've got an open kimono. You're coming into my office. Here it is, right?
So we were talking earlier, and you told me about the six businesses, and couple big wins, couple not so big. Um, you had some tips for business owners. What are some of your couple of your go-to business strategies that you'd like to share with maybe the young business owner, or even the not so young?
Well, yeah, I've experienced a lot. I mean, I think depending on where you are in the business, I mean, I think the biggest tip that couple of tips that I can think of is number one, you just got to have a vision of what you want. I mean, at the end of the day, and you might not know right away, but you really need to put some head time into what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and do something that lines up with what you're passionate about. And I don't mean like, I love to do this, I love to do that, but just from a missional standpoint, because if you don't start with the end in mind, and Good to Great was Stephen Covey has written
Yeah.
about that. Begin with the end in mind, the 7 habits. I mean, you have to know where you're going in order to chart the right path and know if you're on track, because you're going to get knocked off track, all the time. And the goal is to try to get back on track as quickly as you can. So I'd say it's tip number one. Tip number two, I would say align yourself with people that have done it before you, and, get some mentors, get in some kind of a group. It's good to have people outside of your industry that are successful, but also if you have some in your industry, seek that out, even if, you have to, whatever you have to do, because their experience is invaluable. And number three, I would say get started and just keep going at the end of the day, because you're going to have setbacks. And I tend to be an analytical guy, and sometimes over analytical, as my wife reminds me. And so you don't get enough feedback sitting in your own mind. You have to take action, and then look at results, and then make adjustments and take action. But something always good happens on the other side of action, even if it doesn't look like it right away, because you might think one direction is the way to go and you might smack your head against the wall, but at least you're going to learn something from that and make an adjustment and move on. So that's what I would say, the 3 tips.
Awesome. So I always end with some, what I call sort of like the quick snappers. And these are just some quick questions. And also things I learned so much over the years. We've been doing this podcast for about 15 years.
Wow.
What are some of your tips for personal productivity? Any apps or tools that you use?
Yeah. Bad timing on apps and tools because I'm having computer issues right now. But honestly, now this is going to sound old school because I do have a little bit of wisdom right here, as they say, right? And I don't grow up one of these because
Yeah,
it really tells the tale.
you and me
Um,
both.
Jay, my best tool is a yellow notepad, a legal pad, and a pen, and to go to my favorite coffee shop or somewhere. And I like to do it at least once a week. And I try to carve out every day 30 minutes if I can, if I can't get down there. And just think about, review back again, what's the goal? What am I trying to do here? What are the challenges, and just think and just kind of get quiet and get a legal pad, and the important issues tend to bubble up, and it helps me to kind of get clear for the day. And sometimes I can make pretty strategic changes there that when you're in the day to day, working in your business, it's hard to see, the bigger picture. And so you got to step away from it. I had a mentor once told me, he was funny. We were learning how to delegate, build a team and systems and delegate. He's like, how do you know if your team is really effective? And he said what he used to do, and he owned a little airplane business. He said he would take every Friday off until like half days, and he would go do this planning, but then he would take randomly just like 3 days off and not like give people a notice. And then he'd come back and he'd see what was failing, what was falling apart. And so he knew that's what he needed to address, to fix, and then he would repeat the
Interesting.
process, right? And so, because you
Yeah,
don't really learn when you're in there and you're
yeah.
Google and you're answering everybody's questions, right? You want to get away from it a little bit.
That's great. I love it. And definitely when you're doing, you're not thinking. What is there a couple, I might catch you off guard here, but are there a couple of those big, paradigm shifting concepts that came in that coffee shop? Can you remember those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the one of the biggest paradigms for me was the idea of I don't have to be, again, I'm very analytical and kind of driven towards perfection. This idea that I think a lot of business owners fight with, and I've fought with it too, is that, well, I can do it so much easier myself. Okay, it comes easy to me, whatever it is, right? And the problem is, um, those things that come easier that we think we can do really well, that might be true. But what I realized was, if I could do it at, let's say, 100%, but I could hire somebody and train them, and even if they only do it at 70 or 80%, now, and the reality is sometimes they do it a whole lot better in many cases than I ever would have, but it's in between
Yeah,
here, I think that I can do this, right? And now I gotta train somebody and all that. But the realization that if you can help somebody do it at 80% level, then now I've bought all this time back for myself that I can now put into the few things, the one or two things that I really am good at and that no one else can do and that I really do like, which really generally boils down to the strategic level things, the thinking and the business direction and all that. And so it's a bit of a hard, you know, for me anyway, it was a hard kind of questioned or this epiphany. It took a while, and I'd heard it for a long time, and I'd done it for a while, but I don't really think I believed it for a while, right? And then finally it hit me, and it's like, yeah, this is crazy, man. You've only got 24 hours in a day, and you don't want to work any of them, and then you're working all these hours, right?
what are your best business books?
I think the best one outside of the Bible for me, I love Proverbs. It's just so much wisdom on money and business and whatnot. I think it's the best book ever written on that, on business and a lot of things. I love The E-Myth by Michael Gerber because to me, he helps people sort of in that whole paradigm of working in versus working
No,
on
no, I'm
and
only
delegate.
laughing because E-Myth is almost all, it's like 3 out of 4 weeks every month it comes up as one of the answers.
Yeah, I mean, because it's foundational, right? I mean, we're not taught, that's the stuff we're never taught. And we all of us that go into business generally want to go to business because we've got these ambitions and dreams to be free and having, all that. And then you realize you're not. And it's, now you've got a job times two plus all the responsibility, right? And so he was the first one to really kind of to challenge that and educate people on it. So I think that was great. And again, this idea, Dan Sullivan, his idea of who, not how, is one I read not that long ago, which reinforces this whole idea of um, don't try to answer the question, how to do something. That's where most of us get sort of baked in a squat and paralysis of analysis, but ask the question instead, who can do this for me? And that's again that idea of leverage. And from his perspective, and I know we said earlier, even if somebody does it 80% as well as me, his argument is there's people that'll do it 300 times better than you. And so by finding someone like that, you don't have to get wrapped around the axle on, how am I going to learn this? Like internet marketing, for instance. Well, you can learn internet marketing if you take time, energy, and all that, but it's so much easier to go to you, Jay, and say, Jay, can you just do this for me? Because I want to focus on being a lawyer. I want to focus on building my business. And people say, well, I don't want to pay for that. Well, you're going to pay for it one way or the other, right? I mean, there is no free lunch. And
Yeah,
so if you're,
people often ask me like, could we hire someone in-house to do what you do? And
yeah,
I said, you really can't, because like, even if I'm supposed to be like one of the gurus in the internet marketing space,
right,
and I really used to be good at running Google ads, but now I have someone who does it full time all day, every day. And when I go in the platform, it's pretty confusing these days. God help
yeah,
you, trying to get into Facebook, and good luck trying to crack
uh,
the search engine algorithms on Google Maps or SEO. So we have
yeah,
teams of people who do all these things full time, and they're all way better than me at it now.
yeah, oh
So,
yeah,
what happens a lot of times is, the firm will hire someone to be their in-house digital marketing agency, and they'll get someone who's really good at like those ads. They ran
mm,
the ads for their firm, but they don't know anything about the SEO or the social or the video. And they fake it because they know more than the owner. But
sure.
it really isn't, in my opinion, as effective a solution as hiring an agency that really gets it and really has a specialist who do each of those things and have developed the best practices. And the other thing is seeing the scope of it, right? Like, we're seeing 50 or 60
Right,
markets across the country, and
right.
we really see what's working, then we can apply it to the other markets.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing in like buying your building. I tell people like in the book I wrote that, the DIY approach is a way to do it. You can certainly go through the process and educate yourself and find funding and all that on your own, and you can do it. But the thing is, you just don't know what you don't know, and there's a lot you don't know. There's a lot of pitfalls and landmines along the way that they're not going to tell you. You're just going to find out the hard way. And there's a litany of them. And so, besides all that, to your point, we see tons and tons of deals every day and every month and every year nationally. And so we have a pretty good pulse on it. Whereas when you go down to your local bank and say, hey, I want to buy a building, and they say, well, sure, I need X, Y, and Z, and it's going to be 25% down. And they're going to give you the one loan they've got in there, the one tool in their toolbox to try
Yeah.
to solve your problem. And you're going to swallow because you're like, I need how much money?
Well,
And
you
the
might get
reality is you
lucky if
don't.
it's a fit, but if it's not a fit, you're out of luck.
Yeah, yeah, and statistics say, they only approve about 24%, 25% of applications. But and the other thing about that is too, to your in-house person, how do you know that they're doing a great job? Just like how do you know that bank deal is the best deal for you? All you know is what you see, and you're busy doing your thing, and so no one has that 30,000 foot where, it's in your best interest as the agency owner to make sure you're delivering the best value for your clients, because you want them coming back, you want them successful. But your employee, we both know how employees can be. you know um, they take sick days, they do all kinds of things, and to your point, if they know a little bit more than you, they can fake you out and you think you're getting the best return you can get. And the reality is that you might not be getting anywhere near the best return you can be getting. So
Great. Who's your NFL team?
I'm a college guy.
All right, that's okay. You can still answer it.
which college is now, it's almost the new NFL. We're now almost pro with the NIL money
It's
and
amazing, right?
sponsorships and it's so we're going to have the NFL, we're going to have the first tier college top 20,
Yeah.
which is basically the farm league for the NFL, and then everybody else that gets a little bit of money while they're in college and then they go on and work jobs.
But it's really quickly changed the paradigm for the athletes, right? Because if they're making, $1 million or a couple $1 million in college, they don't have to run out to the NFL. And
Right.
they can, in some ways, control their destiny a little bit more. Last question, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. Easiest place to get in touch with me is at our website, ownyourbuildingnow.com. That's ownyourbuildingnow.com. I wrote a book called Unleash Your Business, How to Unlock Wealth, Autonomy, and Control by Buying Your Building and Firing Your Landlord.
Yeah,
get that leash. There. What's that?
Get off the leash.
Get off the leash. That's right.
Like
That's right.
Being on a leash. If you see the
That's
graph.
right.
If
That's
you're
right.
listening and not watching the YouTube today.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, Paul,
so
thank you so much for your time and your advice and, really paradigm shifting thinking for a lot of attorneys. And I hope we're changing some lives that in 10 or 20 years, they'll be thankful they listened to this podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it, Jay. I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the 10 Golden Rules of Internet Marketing for Law Firms podcast. Please send questions and comments to podcast@10goldenrules.com. That is podcast@TENgoldenrules.com.